Hi folks, Ed Snyder with Kansas Trapline Products bringing you this new YouTube video. Hey, I'm up here in Ventura, Iowa with my son Justin Snyder, and he has a small acreage and he sees an opportunity in a little rural development there, and he's wanting to grow chestnuts. He's developing his own market, is slowly expanding across the United States. He's found several varieties, but the one we're going to be doing with is just one variety today out of Illinois, but he's going to talk all about that. The opportunity for rural development or for hobby farms, small acreages, you know, he could potentially have a crop in 3 to 5 years, and as he gets going, he's going to have something that'll really build upon itself. I'm excited to be here with it. I thought I would show you exactly how we're doing it, and you can also contact me and I can get you in touch with Justin if something like this is up your alley. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. I'm having a blast up here. It's a snowy February day in 2019. Why not be in the basement and plant some nuts?
Hello everybody, this is Justin Schneider. I'm Ed Schneider's son, and I'm a little nutty. As you can see, we are out here starting to grow chestnuts. Now, it's in a little bit of an emerging market. For me, it's a big thing because it's a perennial crop. And you plant it once and it will continue to put out nuts. And it typically takes 3 to 5 years for them to actually start producing nuts. And after about 15 to 20 years, you might really start getting the commercial crop. A good harvest for a lot of these is anywhere between 30 and 50 pounds per tree. And so as you can see right here, this here is a chestnut that is a Chinese American cultivar called Louval's Monster. And it was actually bred right there in Illinois. And so it's pretty cold hardy. From what I've been told, it can go probably down to about -30 degrees. So right around zone 4 is about as cold as you really want to go with it. But as you can see, the radicle is starting to push on out. And so they are ready to be planted. Now it's only February 16th or 17th right now. So it's a little too cold to be going on outside. So what we do is we go and we get the soil right here to a nice moisture, and then we put them in these tall tree pots. And then once we fill it on up about 3/4 of the way, we plant the chestnut in there, and then we send them on over to a greenhouse. I rented some space at a greenhouse, and so we keep them there until the risk of frost is out. Once we know the frost is going to be gone, we set them on out in a shaded area, so that way they can start to really harden off, and then we can start planting them out in the soil. So we just went and mixed 3 parts of sphagnum peat moss with 1 part of vermiculite. You can either use the organic vermiculite that's coarse ground for plants, or else you can use the attic loose fill vermiculite that you can get from any hardware store. It doesn't matter, both of them create drainage for the plants. And then after you go and mix it all together, then you can get a nice decent mixture there. You can see that most of it's peat moss, and the organic stuff, it has a lot coarser grind, whereas the loose fill attic, it is a lot finer. So it just depends upon what you really want, but both of them create drainage. And you mix all that together, and then actually you want to pour some more water in there. While you're mixing, you want to keep adding in a little bit of water. That's pretty good, buddy. Keep adding in water while you're mixing it, so that way when you actually plant your germinated chestnut seed, you will it will be able to absorb water, and you can get nice seed soil compaction. If you don't, then it's all just going to go right on top, and then it's going to go right down the side of the pot, and then essentially your seed's going to dry out. The moisture that I'm really trying to reach is where it's wet. It will hold together in a ball like this, but when you squeeze it, water is not coming out. That is like the perfect medium right there. It holds together, but water's not coming out. Once you've gotten that point, that's where you're not going to invite a lot of the funguses like Phytophthora root rot and other diseases because it gets too wet, and then those roots, they get waterlogged, and then disease finds its way on in. Too dry, and then the seed's not able to go and continue growing, and then the seed will eventually die. So right here we have a Struy 4x9 mini tree pot. It comes with holes right here in the bottom, as you can see, for air pruning the roots. The chestnuts, they have deep tap roots. They're a lot like a beech tree or an oak tree, and so they've got roots that they penetrate pretty darn deep. But once they actually get air pruned, they'll send out a bunch of little hairs. And so before we go and plant them in the ground, we want to make sure that they're ready and setting as many roots as possible. So by going and cutting in these extra little holes right here, they're not going to circulate. They're actually just going to poke right on out of the bottom. And then if you look at our flat right here, it's full of little grates. And so once they get exposed to air, they prune themselves and they'll just cut themselves off. And then higher up the root, little hairs will come on out. And by doing that, they'll essentially go and get ready for winter a lot faster than what they originally would be, because for every foot of hair or foot of root that you can put on and then stunt that root and then get hairs, you can get, I wouldn't even be exaggerating to go 5,000 plus root hairs on there. They say for a corn plant, typically if you were to count all of the root hairs and tap roots and all the roots together in one corn plant for a year, you'd end up with over a mile of corn roots per plant. So you can double check me on that, but that's what I've been told. So in order to make sure that our plants are ready for the coming winter, before we plant them, we go and cut all these little air pruning holes so that way the roots don't wrap around. Then once they set all the little hairs, they're ready in about mid-June to early July. And then I typically like to start planting them in August, so in that way we get past that summer drought hump, and then it's a lot less watering to do. And then they can set the roots for next year and over winter. So right now I am going and filling up these tree pots. They're 4" by 9" tree pots, and I fill it up about 3/4 to 7/8 of the way. And then once I get done filling that up, I just grab the next pot and I just do the exact same until I have the entire flat full. Then once I have all of the soil packed on in there, and the reason why you pack that down in there is because if you don't, when you water it, it's all going to settle, and then you're going to have about 1 inch to 2 inches lip. Well, when you go up and do that, that gives your roots 1 inch to 2 inches less room to actually go and grow. So I like to go and pack this on down. Then once I have it down about 1.5 to 2 inches from the top, then I can go and place the seed in there, and then I can go and cover it on up because you want them right around 1 to 2 inches deep. And then I can go and pack that soil on in there, water them down, and then you'll only have maybe about 1/2 inch lip of soil not touching the top. And then that way it just makes it a lot more efficient, and I don't have to worry about the soil settling nearly as much. So this right here is a Duval's Monster chestnut. As you can see, they can get pretty large. This right here is another Duval's Monster, but it's just out of a smaller burr. So lots of times when people show you a Duval's Monster, they'll show you this gigantic chestnut, which it does produce a lot of chestnuts that are this size, but pretty much all chestnut trees will go off and produce smaller chestnuts. It's just something that happens. So either way, what you do is you find the chestnuts that are actually sprouting. Well, they put out the radicals, and every once in a while they will put out 2. As you can see real close right here, this actually had 2 radicals. I snapped one of them off that was spindling way out of control. Then once I actually see one that's starting to spin like that, or if it's longer than 3/4 of an inch, just go off and snap it off. A lot of times you can go and use a snips real quick, and then you want to put that radical pushing straight down. Now what's going to happen is
show that again, or show us another one there. Yeah.
So lots of times when the chestnuts land, they land flat on there, or they land flat on their back part. They typically don't land on their side, which they could if there's a little hill or something like that, but lots of times people tell you to go and plant them with the flat part down. I've planted thousands of these little trees, right? And so long as you have that radical going down, it will survive. It does a pretty darn good job of compensating. So I go and snap off that real long radical because it's starting to get kind of wavy and everything. Go and create a little divot right there in the pot. And I shove that down in there, and then I compress the peat moss around it. Then once I've done that, then I go and cover it on up and compress it on down.
So Justin, in your experience, about how long will it be before we actually start to see the trees start to come up out of the ground? Or out of the pot?
Not very long, maybe about a week.
Oh, wow.
Depending upon how far along that radical has gotten. Some that, like this one has a double radical. That's not very good.
Show us a good example of a double, Justin.
That right there.
So we got two of them. Yep,
You got two radicals. It's creating.
So you're going to get rid of the curly one?
Yep. I'm going to get rid of one of them. Doesn't really matter which one.
Doesn't really matter? Okay.
Yep. So I'm just going to snap that one off. And then I'm probably going to snap that off right like that. And I'm going to just plop it right on in.
Okay.
And, you know.
So a good moisture, not too wet, just like you showed us.
Yep.
In about a week time. But this is when did they start having the radical showing?
Typically it takes 2 to 3 months for them to actually start growing after they've been put in the cold, because you need to cold stratify them. It's a process called vernalization, and so it needs to go through a cold period before the nut can actually germinate. Then once it's gotten through that cold period, it can actually go and germinate, like you said, if the conditions are correct. And with chestnuts, that condition can sometimes be elusive. That's why a lot of people do not go and plant chestnuts or try to cold stratify their own chestnuts, because if your soil, that your growing medium, whatever, is too wet, you'll get, I don't know, you could probably go and get them Phytophthora root rot. If it's too dry, they will mold. Essentially, a chestnut will either stay fresh and grow, or it will mold and die.
Okay.
That's essentially the wild cycle of it.
So we have one here that does not have a radical yet that we can see, but it is cracking.
Yep.
So what are you going to give it faith that it's going to grow?
Yep. Well, what I'll do is I'll go and throw it back in there. It's not moldy right now.
So you'll put it back in and let it stay cool.
Yep. I'm going to put it back in, and I typically keep them right around 28 to 35 degrees.
Okay.
That 28 degree mark, it's kind of scary for me, because you don't want to get any colder than that, because you can actually kill the seed.
Sure. Sure.
But I keep them in bags like this with a bunch of pinholes, with moisture, with peat moss that's just barely moist enough to stay together, but not so wet that you can squeeze moisture out of it. So,
okay.
And then once they start producing the radicals, then I actually start. I really like it if I can get it at them when they are just barely putting a radical out, just barely a little nub, because then you can lay them flat on their side, and it's the way Mother Nature intended it to be.
Right.
But trying to fight off squirrels and rats and mice, it's just a lot safer to do in here. So.
Now, Justin, where did you find out about growing chestnuts? I mean, what's a good resource for people interested in this field?
Well, there's Chestnut Growers of America, and then there's the Northern Nut Growers Association, and then also there's Route 9 Cooperative, that's out of Ohio. That is run by Empire Chestnuts. I apologize, I am forgetting the name of the orchard owner. And then there's Red Fern Farm, that's out of Wapello, Iowa. That is Tom Wall and Nancy.
Now you went originally to a class, didn't you? And that's to a cooperative class or an informational event.
Yes, the Iowa I believe it was put on by the Iowa Nut Growers Association. And that was put on by Tom Wall and Kathy Dice. That's her name.
Kathy
I
Dice.
apologize, Kathy.
No, that's good.
And they did a great job of presenting some of the benefits and hardships of growing chestnuts. And so I learned a lot from them. And then where I first actually heard about them was on public radio, believe it or not. And they were interviewing a guy up in Minnesota that grows them. And so after I found out that you can grow chestnuts up in Minnesota, well, you can probably grow them in Iowa too.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And I've always kind of had a passion to learn more about perennial crops ever since I took my botany class. I got my degree in agronomy from South Dakota State University. Go Jackrabbits.
No college plugs here. No college plugs.
But my one professor talked about blueberries, and I really got interested in that and how you can grow different crops, even though you can typically make a living on corn and soybeans in the area. There is more to farming than just corn, soybeans, wheat, and canola.
Look at the size of that. Look at the size of that nut.
Yeah.
And I tell you, they're very sweet. They're very good tasting. I really enjoyed them, you know, and I just had them raw. Wasn't that the way it was? Way I ate it, Justin, was just raw. So it's a very sweet nut, and it's raw. And so in 3 to 5 years. Now, unfortunately, you're going to have to hand pick these chestnuts. Are you right?
You use a nut wizard, and you just roll it off. They fall out of the burr onto the ground, and then you use this little wire wheel that you roll across the ground. And then my 2-year-old son, he just turned 3, Quinn. He ended up picking probably a good 10 to 15 pounds by himself. So pretty much anybody can do it.
Okay, right.
The biggest key is making sure that the orchard floor is well mowed, and then you also want to make sure that you're wearing very sturdy shoes. You don't want to be going out and wearing flip-flops, because the burrs of these things are just they can punch through a flimsy pair of sneakers.
Now the variety we're doing here is this Chinese American cross, and there's also, what are the common, you mentioned 3 of them that are kind of common. Any other varieties, and you got any ideas about, you know, pros and cons of the ones that you do know about?
I wouldn't really say that there's too many cons. The big con I would say is there's Mike Gold from University of Missouri Columbia Center of Agroforestry. He has come up with quite a few different papers stating the ones that will yield. He's got quite a few years of research done up, and he tells you how much each tree yielded, and that's in pounds, and what years they actually were planted. And so you can kind of see the progression, and you can go back and look at the year's weather, so that way you can see, well, what happens if it gets really dry, what happens if it's really wet. And some of these trees, they will suffer from phytophthora rot, and some of the trees, they will succumb to a late frost, and they won't produce a nut.
Okay.
The more Chinese varieties and cultivars, they are typically not as cold hardy as the Chinese American ones. So then you've got ones like Sago. That one is a very complex hybrid. That's the one that I'm really trying to get going here. It's a great pollen producer, and it's got multiple different chestnut varieties bred into it. Whereas the Luval's Monster right here, that was bred in Illinois, it's a great cold hardy variety, but it is pollen sterile. So you have to have a good pollenizer, good pollen tree in order to make it produce nuts.
And so what tree are you using to do that?
Sagos.
Sagos. So you do have sagos out there.
I've got a few sagos, but I've got more in the refrigerator.
Okay. I gotcha. Yeah. Well, this is a new project for Justin and I, and it's a lot of fun doing this, folks. You know, I'm gonna sign off of here. just wanted to show you another great opportunity. And if you're interested in something like this, you know, certainly check out the American Chestnut Association and look on their website for more information. But if something like this appeals to you, you know, get on it, I guess. So I find it very interesting. I see a great opportunity down the road in developing this market. It's a great nut, great flavor, very sweet. I think we'll start seeing it in some of our dishes in the future.